when you talk about initiatives, because obviously HR, so you guys are HR, you are in HR. Like I am going to be speaking slightly out of turn now without a HR lens on. But my experience of HR is that you've got two very distinct lanes, interestingly.
Pun
Um,
intended.
and one of those lanes is the sort of people, structure, process, policy,
Hmm.
employment bit of
The
HR.
compliance, yeah.
Yeah. And the other bit is when you talk about initiatives, people development,
Hmm.
talent management, talent acquisition, talent nurturing, talent maintenance, talent growth.
Absolutely.
Um, when you talk about initiatives at Shuko, what sort of initiatives were they?
Um, Putting all the compliance to one side
Mm,
because that had to happen
sure.
regardless. So they're the nuts and bolts and the foundation of any company. It was more like, how can we make sure that we get top performance out of all of our staff, regardless of what level they are, what job they hold, anything like that. Um, it was a top performing product.
Yeah.
So we needed top performing staff to be
Mm,
able to sell it, to design it, to make it, to distribute it. So, there was a lot of emphasis on the development and the retention of those good staff because we had a huge training center there, which I was responsible for. And not only did that train our internal staff in whatever skill set they needed to upskill on, but I also trained the probably close to about 3,000 fabricators that were Shuko's client base
okay.
to be able to, because Shuko in itself didn't go and actually build the buildings. Our client base, which is the
The
fabricators,
fabricators, yeah.
they then went and done the install.
Mm.
But to hold the Shuko reputation, they needed to be trained. So I also ran the large training center at Shuko, and like I say, 3,000
Mm.
people went through that every year.
And it's interesting because training is development, is people development. It's developing those people on skill set, but also technical understanding, technical knowledge. And you've got that working in most places. We like to think well and within organizations, but also there's that channel thing that so the fabricators being essentially your channel. If they're not well
Yeah.
trained, they're not going to sell your product or even use your product. And if they're not using or selling, then you have no service line, you've got no customer base. So that training is really, really important, and therefore they need growing and developing. And that's where you build that sort of interconnecting relationship with your customer base. Um, can I just come back on a couple of things that you said there? Because you talk about it being a top quality product, world class product, right? The business and the brand, and we see this all the time, right? With businesses and with brands, you've got a world class company, a world class brand, a world class product, world class service. In order to really deliver on that, you need world class people,
Hmm.
which is where the initiatives in HR are so important. And yet, I'm going to be crude here a little bit and slightly critical. So many businesses that I work with and see still put people initiatives down on the priority list
Couldn't agree more.
because they're so focused. And you know what? This, again, it shouldn't sound critical because this focus is right. They are focused on delivering a great brand and a great product because without that, you can't serve your customer. And yet we all know that the people in any business are often the biggest and greatest asset because without them, nothing else will happen.
Mhm.
And I know that the 2026 AI revolution people will challenge that and say, yeah, people are only going to be around for until AI really becomes people. Um, but people are the greatest asset. I believe that. I think many people do still believe that. And that comes down to the question then that we've got and we're exploring today around why is it, if that's true, so many people initiatives still struggle to get not just airtime, priority, focus, funding at board level. Dawn, thank you so much for joining us today, and Harley, welcome as well. Tell me a little bit, I guess, about the work that you do at Lanes HR, the kind of organisations that you work with, your clients, and what your view is on why these HR initiatives like really seem to just struggle to get over the line when everyone knows that they're really, really important.
Um, I think I'll probably start that with one caveat that
Mm,
is your was your closing sentence then. that everybody knows that companies should have, a great people, and they are the biggest asset. I question whether there are companies that do. I
Right.
would still struggle to say that there are companies that actually don't value their staff,
Hmm.
and we see that more and more often.
Mm,
Sales, yeah, is important. Operations to get a product out or a widget out is important, and there are still a lot of companies out there that don't necessarily see the people asset
mm,
as they should do. HR professionals do, of course they do, and it's something that I've been fighting
mm.
against for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
With regards to Lane's HR, Lane's HR was born after I completed probably my corporate world. I was in the corporate world for many years, and then when I left the corporate world, I didn't just want to go into the same job, just in a different company.
Mm,
I wanted to prove that there are so many SMEs out there that could deal and do with my level of experience, because they don't have the budget, they don't have the funding, and so I set up the consultancy to initially to support SMEs with their HR, because they don't have internal HR. And it's been going 8 years. Our client base is vast,
Hmm.
and we literally run from 2 people to 5,000 people. So we do across the range, and multidisciplinary, and multi-sector as
yeah.
well. And we do support MDs, or business leaders or business managers in the
Mm,
smaller organizations.
mm.
And then in the corporates that already have their internal HR function, we either, support with a project or fractional support, or,
Yeah.
anything that they need. So a very vast portfolio of clients, and a very vast portfolio of skill sets across the HR spectrum.
And so you just described there what my experience is the sort of typical, not just typical model, but typical reason actually that a lot of HR consultants and smaller consultancies sort of go it alone and move into this space where they can support organizations either fractionally within HR, so HR to HR, or as an outsourced service where a HR function doesn't exist in a business. I want to come back to some of the reasonings behind that and what I see as common reasonings and your passion and your purpose for people development. Harley, if I can just ask you for a moment there, because it's fair to say that your entry into the HR world
Hmm.
comes from a sort of passion for people and a passion for wanting to develop others,
Yeah.
but wasn't the straight line, if you like, in terms of corporate HR to outsourced HR that Dawn's just described.
Hmm.
So tell me about like what was the pivotal moment for you and what draws you into this work?
So my background is very different. I hadn't touched HR at all since the last kind of 3 years. And me and Dawn had a conversation around kind of people engagement, and it just kind of seemed like the right time to step into the HR world because I'm all about people. So I've been entertaining before and in hospitality and things, and I've seen it firsthand how employers don't look after their employees.
Mm,
And it kind of made me want to make a change in that world. So I joined Lanes and have hopefully made a bit of a change into the industry from a younger perspective as such. I don't have 35 years experience behind me, but I'm coming in with a fresh set of eyes that hasn't had a corporate background.
yeah.
So I can bring in a little bit more from a personable side and what I would expect from an employer, and
Yeah.
trying to help bring that to employers.
And it's interesting you said what you would expect from an employer,
Hmm.
because one of the things that I always talk to my clients about when it comes to customer growth and customer relationship management is to imagine that the customer was in the conversation with you and
Yeah.
ask what would they say. So I think it's really important that HR is a really really important conversation that does happen. I mean, we're going to challenge how much of it happens and what type of conversation happens at board
Hmm.
level, but it would be wrong of us not to say that it happens because it does. When it happens, how many of the newer employees, younger
Hmm.
employees, are there in that conversation? And often very few. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to have that lens and that voice in the room. Um, Dawn, I'll come back to the journey again. So that corporate into consultancy, which is a common route,
Absolutely.
like almost, it's prevalent. It's like common seems like I'm downplaying it a little bit actually. Typical might be the better word. Um, the reason I see for that is this frustration, this sort of hands tied, if you like. I know what I want to do in the business to develop people. I'm just not getting the backing of my peers, the rest of the board.
Yep.
And that's what we wanted to talk about today, because if we could give a gift to any HR leaders or any people out there in business about how they engage employees and create cultures that add more value, that are high performing, that are high quality, that are world class, that gift would be giving them the keys to unlock the purse strings. So tell me about, I suppose, your experience in that challenge that you had when corporate, and then also now how you guide and help both HR leaders and then also influence MDs to unlock the budget.
Okay. You're asking this, and this is running at a very, very difficult time,
Sure.
especially given all of the challenges, the economic challenges that every company is facing at the
Yeah.
moment. And with the exception of a few, construction is sort of like on its knees.
Mm.
So it's a hard ask to start with, but it's becoming progressively harder at this moment in time. And there's not a HR professional out there that isn't saying to themselves, yes, but if you got your people planning right, if you got the development right, if they were all working to 100% performance, if they were all working to 100% capacity, we wouldn't be in half the situation that we are. Um, but sadly, even yesterday, I was speaking to some business owners, and we asked, what do you know, and are you ready for the changes tomorrow, being today,
Hmm.
from the Employment Rights Bill?
Yeah.
And the response was, I don't have time for that. I've got to keep the doors open.
Mhm.
So that's the struggle that any HR professional, whether
Mm.
it be in the corporate or whether it be in SME world or consultancy, that's what we are
Yeah.
realistically facing. Even, I suppose, harder for training at this moment in time, because when the economy is falling, generally the two first things that go are training
And
and
marketing.
HR
Well, and
and
HR. So yeah, I was going to say
marketing.
marketing as well,
Yeah,
because
marketing,
it,
agreed.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so counterintuitive.
absolutely,
Like
absolutely.
like it's and even those that cut those budgets know that it's counterintuitive.
Mhm.
Like I feel like at the moment we live in a world of whack-a-mole,
Yeah,
right?
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it's like what's popping up today that I need to hit with my hammer today.
Mhm.
Yep,
And so I'm going to come back to your construction life,
yep,
right? Because in construction, like no construction firm out there would even dream of building anything without first looking at the land that lies underneath and the foundations that they have to put in.
yep, correct.
And the land that lies underneath and the foundations that are put in anywhere are the people that actually build whatever it is that they're building.
Correct.
In construction world, that being buildings, literally. In the business world, that's like the business, the brand, the customer channel, the sales, the growth, and, right? So it's foundational.
Mhm.
It's a mole that might struggle to rear its head above the surface when you've got so many other moles that are rearing its head above the surface. Do we need to force the mole above the surface? Like,
Absolutely.
how do we find it?
Um, I think to a degree, and this might be a partly an unpopular discussion. I think to a degree, HR have sometimes let themselves down in the past, and we're also fighting a legacy
Mm.
of what HR is perceived to be.
Mm,
So we've gone from personnel, which was the T and the sympathy.
mm,
We then changed to human resources,
mm,
which was supposed to think more integral to the business and using your humans as an asset. Currently, we're now at people and culture, for someone that's seen all those changes, I think, but it's all the same. We're doing the same thing. Um, and why are we still not being taken seriously? Why are there still few, senior HR people at the top table? Why isn't it an
Mm,
automatic seat at the top table? Why do HR still fit under the finance director, which
mm,
is a case in a lot of corporate companies? And I think the biggest thing is that HR have got to do is take the emotion out, and that's really hard for a HR professional, is to
mm,
actually take the people side out of it,
mm.
because fundamentally that's what we're built on.
Yeah.
We're not built on numbers, we're not built on widgets or products, we're built on people and
Mm,
what that means to a business. And in today's world, those people have to be transferred to figures at a board level.
Mhm.
mm.
This, if we do not do this, it's going to cost us this. And that's the framing that you need to find in the corporate world at this moment in time.
And I love that because so when I was getting my head into this conversation today, the dynamic, the paradox, if you like, that I was exploring in terms of spectrum was emotion versus logic,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and how emotion sits at the heart of all humans, and that empathy level is what most HR leaders and HR professionals are great at. It's what they're drawn to. It's what they started their careers
yeah,
to
Mhm.
achieve, their purpose. And yet, as you've just said, like the framing needs to be logical. Can I come back to the language? So, personnel to HR to people and culture. If we were talking to an employee now,
Mhm.
what does it need to be called for you for it to be something that is there for you, right for you, developing you? Like, what's the language that it should, if you were renaming it today, I'm
Yeah.
putting you on the
You
spot,
are, gosh.
right? And maybe there isn't if there was an easy answer, maybe we'd have it
Mhm.
already. Like, but what do you think it should be? Like, what's
I think that's a hard question because I think from an employee side of view, whenever somebody goes, "Oh, you're HR," and even from when I go out networking and everybody goes, "What do you do?" and I'm like, "I'm in HR." Oh my gosh. Oh,
mm.
I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to tell you about my secrets. I don't want to have a conversation. I'm like, why not?
Oh, right.
Just a person,
Yeah.
just a HR person.
Are they
So I
worried they're going to
think
say something wrong, and as
100%.
HR you must by law you must
Mhm.
report it, and there'll be
We don't get invited to
disciplinary
the
and
Christmas parties. We don't get invited to anything. We don't get thank yous. We don't get nothing. I think people think we're just there to do the work and go home. They forget that we're actually people too. And it's really difficult to get them to see that because we are just the bottom of the barrel in every opportunity. From an employee side, I think if I wasn't in the HR world and I joined a company and they've said, okay, you need to go see the HR people, something to do around employee relations, employee, something with that in the title to know that I'm okay to go and talk to them. I'm not going to get in
yeah.
trouble if I go and speak to
Because
them.
it's interesting. Obviously, at Incentive Smart, we have the employee engagement
Mm-hmm.
platform, right? And employee engagement is built upon the premise of rewarding relationships.
Yeah.
In other words, the show that we're talking on today, rewarding relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's you build the right relationships with your team
Yeah.
inside the business and your external team, i.e., the customer and the channel and
Mm-hmm.
fabricators in the construction world and all of that. You build the right relationships. You recognize those
Yeah.
relationships. You reward those relationships, both emotionally and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
That creates an engaging culture, an engaging community,
Yeah.
engaged employees, right? So is that, and it's interesting because I struggle with the name employee engagement, because even that doesn't feel like it captures it
Mm-hmm.
all. When you add all the sentences that follow, of course it's right,
Yeah.
but it's what you've just described there. Actually, is HR in today's world, does it need to be more than just people culture? Because those two words are
Mm-hmm.
engaged employees, like the heart of what you do, the relationships that matter.
Yeah. It's the perception. The perception needs
Yeah.
to change of who we are and what we do and the type of work that we do. Like I remember one HR manager that I had in a company I worked at and everybody loved him. He was a real people person and he didn't make it about HR. You
Mm,
were just told, okay, you're going to go see this person and they'll talk you through everything. Great, fabulous. But he made a point of making you feel involved and part of the process
mm.
and someone that can go and talk to him. That in relationship was completely different to what I've ever had with any other HR person.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to change the perception.
So when I watch, as most people do, binge watch TV shows,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those are made over in the States. And when you see corporate culture in the States, you often see HR representatives
Mm-hmm.
in businesses and in remote, regional offices, etc. And your HR rep, actually, you're talking about the emotion versus logic, their fundamental role is to bridge that gap
Yeah.
because they're being set very, very logical, you know, projects, initiatives, they're being set logical objectives by corporate governance. And yet, on the ground, boots on the ground, they have to represent the people that has to translate to. So, is it representative? That's part of, and we're not here today to rename HR, but I do think it's
But
a
I
really
think it
curious.
should be renamed.
Yeah.
I think HR still has the negative connotations
Mm,
that, as Harley's just mentioned, oh, HR's in the room, we're in trouble. Or
Always.
what have I done
Well,
wrong? Or I can't say anything now.
yeah.
So I do think that, and that's why a lot of corporate companies are also slowly but surely currently changing from HR director to CPO,
Yeah.
chief people officer. Because I do think that the word HR still has, sadly, a negative connotation with it.
So, HR in the room, you just said a moment, and therefore we won't speak. So, let's go back to the boardroom again.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality is that when are in the room at board level, some people on the board, it's not that they won't let them speak.
They don't see the value in it.
Maybe they don't listen to what's being said.
Yeah.
So let's go logical here. What does need to be said? So I'm a HR leader. I know that I've got because the manager's telling me I've got an underperforming team. And I've done a little bit of a deep dive with that manager because at people to people level, I'm the representative and I can do that. And I'm having that conversation about the skills gaps and the competency gaps. And maybe there's a mindset shift that needs to happen. We've unpacked, me and the manager. We've realized that what we need to do is roll out a development program. I'm using those words carefully and not calling it training because training, I think, in that case, is probably more than just soft skill or even technical skill training. It's a mindset shift. So there's facilitation, there's group work, and. So a development program is what's needed. That's the initiative. I know that. Manager knows that. We've got that nailed. Now I've got to take that to the board. What do I say in the boardroom? How should I package that up?
You certainly don't go in and say our managers need a training program.
Interesting. Do you think a lot of people say things like that then? Because that would be an obvious thing to say and a truthful thing to say.
I still think there are potentially HR leaders out there that think more from a people perspective
Yeah.
rather than a commercial perspective.
Oh, I'm like a dog with a bone so I agree, right? And I can't be critical about that because that's their world. That's what they are there to do. That's the passion. Walking into a boardroom and saying, spoken to a couple of managers, we need a training program versus I've found out why said department is only performing at 70% of their capacity. And actually to get them to 80, 90, and then eventually 100 and then 100 plus of their capacity and their output and their performance, we've identified a few areas which could be the quickest fixes in getting that team to upskill. And talking about it in that language starts to become, and I've simplified it. That was clunky. It wasn't even a particularly good pitch, for want of a better word. But I'm starting to put it in board language now. I'm starting to talk a bit more commercially. Is that because again, I'm flipping back and forwards here a little bit. But if I was a HR lead and I said, I figured out we need a training program, my assumption in that language is that everyone understands why training is important and that everyone will value training and that they'll see training as a performance, indicator and therefore and, right? So
But they would also generally, if it was framed like that, they would also see it as a nice to have. We've got a purse here, HR leader, and, we're struggling. We need to do this. We've got either to put it to marketing, sales, a new production line, new vehicles so that we can get there quicker, a training program. To me at this point is a nice to have.
Yeah.
That's if you went in and framed it like that, that's the way that it would be. But going back on what you've just said and how you framed that and saying it was a bit clunky, I agree with what you said, but I would have gone even further at the beginning by saying, this department is running at 70% and it's costing us X.
Ooh, so the output, the outcome, the result of that deficiency, right?
Absolutely.
And go there with it.
That's where you'll get the ears pricked up.
Right.
If you put either a risk to it
Mm.
or a cost association to it.
Because they'll listen to figures.
Because I mean, I always talk about, in the sales world, we talk about who are your competitors and how do you stand out from your competition. And arguably, one of the biggest competitors when you are selling a product or service is the competitor of nothing. In other words, that the customer just decides not to do the thing that you're looking for them to do. It's the same in your world, right? As in, you're looking for budget to do something that's important. The idea that they don't is cheaper always for them to understand. So what you're looking for them to do is that don't gives you negative, it costs. And that's the real risk. So I know you talk a lot about doubling down language, doubling down, articulating the risk of doing nothing. And you're saying maybe even lead with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If we don't lead with our managers need training and it's going to cost us this, lead more with, and as I say, this is clunky, so bear with me here, but lead more with a framing that says, we have this issue in the company. It's costing us this at this moment in time. It would cost us this to rectify that, or it would cost us this if we didn't do anything.
Yeah. Can I take you back to Shuko again? And just ask, so who were your toughest cookies?
In terms of the board?
Well, so because you've just described things, even though you say it's clunky, you've just described things in a really logical and board level way of talking, right? This is what it's going to cost you. Can you afford to lose that? Like that's ballsy, and in all the right ways, right? And the board will listen to that. That's credible business leader, albeit in the HR function, right? Credible business leader. And I say albeit, that sounded really critical there. Albeit in that's not less than, that's that. It's knowing that we know that others will look at the HR function as not credible business leaders, right? But you've just come across there in the way that you've articulated that as full on, I'm on the board and this is what I'm saying. People will listen to that. Who, even with that ballsy articulation, was your challenge? You don't need to name them, by the way.
I certainly wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't, because Shuko is a very good company, so I certainly wouldn't. I would have possibly said dual finance and operations, maybe.
Okay. Oh, and I kind of imagined that you would say that. And the reason I imagine that you would say that is, so, you guys are in HR. I know we're challenging the language here, but you'll be familiar with the different personality traits and, different makeup of people that we see in different walks of life, and embracing that diversity of thinking and behavior is part and parcel of what we need to achieve in every business. I don't like typing. I really don't like typing. I don't believe that has a place in the work. Typing is like labeling, and sometimes a label is needed in order to be able to simplify. So I'm going to use some labels now. From a CFO point of view, we tend to have quite an analytical, evidence-based energy. Yeah. For those that use personality portrait work, colors-wise, we're talking blue energy here, right? The blue
absolutely.
energy sits in that CFO space, right? Of course, they're outcome-focused as well. Dominant blue, right? Operational, dominant blue verging into red, so quite purple, I would say. Like the purple energy there is outcome focused because there's tasks that have to get done efficiently, productively, and it's still evidence based. Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We need a structure, we need a process, we need a workflow, and. What you're describing in terms of training and development often will lend itself more to the thinking of those that are the green energy and the people focused, and will understand that people get great things and do great things when they are developed. And the yellow energy that will see the need, I suppose, for that change. Like, I was going to use the word radical there, but it doesn't need to be radical. Just change.
Yeah.
Change is needed. Like change is growing. All of that stuff, and visualizing what it would be like to have a more engaged workforce. So to hear you say CFO and operations draws me straight into typing. And I said I don't like typing, but draws me straight to those archetypal personalities. Do you see that?
I do. Yeah, I do, because depending on the size of your board, and whether or not your CEO is people focused anyway. Because, like I said, there's two very, very different paths here. If you've got a CIO, if you've got a CEO that values its staff as an asset,
Mm.
and I don't just mean a financial asset, but actually believes that their people are the foundation
Yeah.
and fundamental part of their business, the door is halfway open.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You've still got to talk commercially, you've still got to talk strategically, but you're not pushing on a closed door there. It's the CEO who doesn't see any of that, believes that, sales and ops and everything just happens. And I'm not dumbing down a CEO position,
Yeah.
but you've got different characters at any position on the
Yeah.
board, haven't
Yeah.
you? CFOs are always the same, in my opinion.
Ooh, bold.
I
Like I
Straight out
want to
there.
pause and let the phone lines ring.
I-
Like, can a CFO that wants to challenge that call me right now? I agree, by the way.
the CFOs I've had the pleasure of dealing with anyway.
Yeah.
And they're not wrong either. They are looking after the finances of the company. So
Mhm.
so
Mm.
what they're saying is not wrong. However, there is sometimes less leniency towards HR. But if I can, through want of not wanting to, upset you, but you said to me a second ago, you are HR. If I can just reframe that to you,
Mm.
I'm a business leader
Mm.
who specializes in people, not the other way around.
Nice. And actually, HR leaders can learn a lot from that framing.
Yeah.
Because they are on the board.
Yeah.
In many organizations. Of course, some organizations will outsource, as they do with you guys.
Mhm.
And equally, you are sat at their boardroom conversations, if not in their full board meetings.
Yeah.
Because they know it's important.
Mhm.
So business leaders with a people lens and a people view and, tasked with an objective of developing the people to get the best. I think we could talk a lot about the different energies and the different personalities, because the CEOs that do it well, of course, are the ones that might have a dominant yellow energy and therefore a big vision,
Yeah.
but are able to then draw upon and feed upon the green energy of the people and the red energy of the outcome, and anchoring with that destination, yet knowing that there needs to be a journey, and then framing it in a way that works with the blue evidence based of, we know that if you develop XYZ, you will get and. So I think there is something really important, and I'm laboring this point, I guess, because for HR leaders that are watching or listening to this now, they know all of this. Some of them will themselves be practitioners in personality trait tools. And yet, when was the last time before they stepped into the boardroom and asked for funding for something, they thought, who's in the room?
Mhm.
And what do I need to flex and adapt to be able to speak to all of those different personalities? So taking your CFO, your CRO from the revenue and the sales and the marketing, your CEO, your COO, taking all of those different personalities and knowing, how do I frame this for each and every one of them? That could be a really, really useful step for people, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, from a HR professional, the one thing that you need to do to be taken seriously is to know the business. Don't just know the people.
Yeah.
Don't sort of like shrink yourself down into, I'm just human resources. No, be a fundamental part of that business. So when you're in your board meetings, know the figures. Figures sometimes, and for me as well, quite. I'm very open in saying, I'm not the fastest at looking at a spreadsheet and picking out that one figure that looks wrong. It takes me a little bit of time, but then other leaders can't hold a meeting or an investigation like I can. So we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. So know your figures. Go into the room by reading the previous board meetings. What were their pinch points at that point? Get to know them. What happens operationally? And if you know their pinch points and challenge them and support them, that's when they start to respect you a little bit more as a business leader, and not just waiting for the agenda section, normally at the bottom, that says HR issues,
Mhm.
to come around, because you've played a commercial and strategic part in that business in that meeting from the start. So gear yourself up commercially. That's what I would say to any HR professional, to actually win them over a little bit more. You've got to earn some reputation
Mm.
at board level in HR.
And just if I was taking that point and giving, I guess, what I would call a top tip, if you like, if that is a blind spot for you, a challenge for you, I'm avoiding using the word weakness because I don't see it as
Yep,
that. But if it
yep.
is a blind spot issue for you, then there is an opportunity to take whatever your planning and preparation is that you've got for that board meeting, or to take whatever facts, figures, and board packs that they've been issued to any of your tools that you have in the business, AI or otherwise, like, use Copilot, use ChatGPT, and just in your prompt say, I'm going into a board meeting. These are the people that I'm going to be with. These are their preferences. Prep me.
Absolutely.
Like, it could be that quick and straightforward to just have a little bit of technical support for your blind spot preparation, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Or to bridge the gap a little bit between, I'll call it CPO because everything else is called C something,
Mm,
between your CPO and your
mm,
CFO, go to them.
mm,
Actually take that sort of like that initiative and say, look, we may not always see eye to eye, and you may always see me asking for stuff that you may not believe is a priority. Can you tell me a little bit more to understand those figures? So that then they think, oh,
Mm.
CPO's coming to me. I
yeah,
feel really important
yeah,
now. So you start to build a few of those relationships that might otherwise be a little bit broken. And then when you're in that board meeting and you're challenging the CFO,
mm,
it's not that automatic block or
mm,
that brick wall that's been built up. He or she may think, no, actually, they're trying to
yeah.
figure out how this can fit in with the business needs.
And so, Dawn, you're beginning to sound in all the right ways like a salesperson here.
Like, I'm the
Because,
worst salesperson in the
so do
world.
you know what, Dawn? I'm going to challenge that. I am going to challenge that, and because you're saying that, and I imagine that you're saying that because you have a distaste, a disliking for the idea of being a great salesperson. And a lot of people do, by the way. Like, we can unpack that on another day. Like, the
Well, I think
idea
we
of
should do.
what does sales mean? Harley, I'm going to come to you there
All
because
good. Okay.
something that so I know, because we've spoken about
Mhm.
this, that you used to work on the holiday parks, right?
I did.
You started off your entertainment career, I guess,
Yeah.
working with audiences and
Mhm.
holidaymakers. And part and parcel of that world, and I'm saying this from a point of personal experience, those that know me
Yeah.
will know that I had my stripes, literally had my
Mhm.
stripes back in the day. And part of that world is rapport building.
Yeah.
It's stakeholder, business context, stakeholder engagement,
Mhm.
building relationships with people that you might not be like,
Mhm.
people that you might not like, let's be real.
Yep.
But you're building those bridges because then whatever you do on stage
Mhm.
becomes that intense amount easier,
Oh,
right?
100%.
So we're saying the same thing here in terms of
Mhm.
what is selling.
Yep.
It's about influencing and it's about personal presence. So there is something I think really, really important in performance in business that we can learn from performance outside of the business world, even though the performance world is a business too,
Yeah.
right? But we can learn something about performance that gives us a steer on personal presence, on executive presence, that I think a lot of HR leaders, it's not that they don't know or don't work on, they don't, it's their whack-a-mole. Maybe
Mhm.
they're not whacking that mole. Maybe they need to double down a bit on the personal presence and the personal performance of the way that they both present their idea, but also build the bridges. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I think sometimes so if we go back to kind of the entertainer days when you're on stage, you'd know as well. If you know somebody in the audience,
Mm,
your confidence is
mhm,
1,000 times more because you're
mhm,
like, right, I'm going to nail this for them. I'm
mm,
going to make sure that they're proud of what I'm doing right now.
yeah,
And I think from what Dawn was saying about going into a board meeting and you need to own the meeting, you need to own what you're saying because by saying it with confidence, people will believe you. You can blag and blag and blag as much as you want. But if you sound confident and you look calm and assertive in the right way, you'll be listened to by the right people.
mm,
I think if you show your weaknesses, let's say with you're shaking, your voice is trembling, your paper's a bit nervous, you're not very organized, unfortunately, you're not going to look like you know what you're talking about.
yeah,
And those top dogs are not going to listen to that because they just want to know what you want, how we're going to get there, and the result at the end.
yeah,
So by walking in and being confident, assertive, and having that ally of walking in and knowing that when you look at that person, they kind of give you you're doing all right.
yeah.
That's going to make you go, do you know what? Yeah, I am doing all right.
Mm.
Let's get it done.
So there's something like intuitive, natural, like native in HR professionals around people. There's
Mhm.
something that sits there and sometimes dormant around performance.
Yeah.
And there's something really, really important about focusing on the productivity and the profit of whatever it is that they're asking for, because that's the commercial language that needs to be used. When we talk about the language that is used, I'm always curious about the internal language that's being used that we can't necessarily hear. In other words, what is someone else hearing when we're speaking?
Mm.
And we might not have an answer to this, but I wonder what, like, so in your experience, Dawn, when I'm going to use the word pitched. Sorry to put you into sales category again,
That's
but
okay.
right, when you've pitched a people initiative
Sure.
to a board, what do you think they're hearing?
Again, it would be different depending on whether you've got your values,
Hmm.
or the board that values people versus the board that doesn't.
Yeah.
If you've got the board that values I believe they're hearing. Um, we are trying to do the business needs to do the best for its employees, to retain them, to engage them.
Mm,
However, we can't spend everything we have on people, because generally your wage bill
mm,
is the highest proportion
mm,
of your costs,
mm,
after your cost of goods, is. Um, if you've got the other side, I tend to think they're still thinking this is HR. It's a nice to have, which is why you need to frame it in their own language. Their own language is risk, performance, money, and impact.
mm,
That's what they want to hear. So you have to sort of like regenerate your proposal into sounding like them.
mm,
Because if you start to say their words, that's what they're used to. And nobody's the same, are they? Do you know what I mean? A CEO would think differently to me, that would think differently from an ops manager. We all have a part to play on a board.
mm,
Um, and like I said, sadly, the HR person on the board, or the CPO, is also fighting a negative legacy,
mm.
because HR is still fluff and stuff, which it really isn't. It really isn't.
Fluff and stuff. I love that.
So they've got a hard job to do to start with. But I agree with Harley. You have to go in, and I've done it myself. I've been sick before a presentation because I'm that nervous,
Mm,
in front of the big German board, or so this is the board above the board sort
yeah.
of presentations. So they're people that you're not used to even dealing with day to
Mhm.
day. So you
Mm,
really have to get the impact across there. So, but when you open that door and you walk into that boardroom, you are assertive.
mm,
I know my stuff. All the HR leaders, they know their stuff,
mm.
Mhm.
but sometimes it's that assertiveness or that influence that they lack a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
And is there something key? It's interesting, isn't it, that a good HR leader will be fighting the corner of the business in terms of people development. Maybe one of the things they need development on themselves is presence,
Mhm.
Absolutely.
performance, presentation, like power, influence. Like
Absolutely.
like I do, like I know again, another day that's challenged the whole why I don't like being a sales and all that. But everyone in every business is a salesperson because
I
everyone in
do agree.
they've all got to influence someone somewhere.
Yeah.
So therefore, all of those skills need to be developed. And maybe HR leaders listening or watching will be thinking, do you know what? If that's a blind spot, let me level up my influence skills to be able to be more assertive in a room that I might feel uncomfortable in, to be able to present more articulately, to be
Mhm.
able to lead with the commercial logic and the risk based facts, figures, stats that push people to listen and ensure that actually that initiative, that proposal gets heard. Because it's one thing asking people to listen, is another thing getting them to actually hear what they're listening to. And that's where I think the power and the presence
Mhm.
does really play a massive part, right?
And I can absolutely guarantee there's not one HR leader that goes into a board meeting and thinks, I just want to waste some of the company's money today.
Yeah.
There's not one of them.
Yeah.
There is always a purpose behind it.
Yeah.
But because we get so involved in the speaking to the line manager or being, an open door to the employees, we've got our ear to the ground where it really matters.
Mm.
That doesn't necessarily reach the CEO or the CFO. We're supposed to be, that fundamental part of the business that, as you've quite rightly said, is the gap between the employees and the senior management.
Yeah.
So again, it's more about framing. Okay, fine. I cannot go into this boardroom and say the employees are upset. Morale is at a low. Because if you open with that, I'm not even going to say probably on this what the response from half of the board would be.
Yeah. They get
Um,
paid their wage. Time to get on with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's like that.
And
No one
more.
in the history of getting on with it got on with it because they were told to get on with it. Like,
But that's where the frustration comes from as a HR leader and a business leader, because we hear it firsthand from the employees. The top dogs don't hear that. They're hearing it from us. And it's really hard, I think, and you will know from doing presentations, from not letting your frustration get to them, because you just need to go in with that mindset of don't show emotion, don't get frustration. But you leave that room and you think, God, either it didn't work or that I could have done that better and I could have done that better, because you're going to go back to the employees and they're going to go, how'd you get on? Or the other managers are going to be like, did we get a yes? Did we get a no? And that falls on you as a people leader because you are the face of it all.
We talked quite a bit today about framing and positioning, and I think there are some frames and some positions. There's actually a structure that sits at the heart of this all, I imagine. I don't necessarily have the right words for it yet, but what I'm hearing, of course, is all about, people sits at the heart of it all. We know that already, and I don't think that's what HR leaders would challenge. So what we need to do is frame people back to being the asset that they are, back to being the commercial output, the outcomes that the boards are looking for and want to hear, back to being actually the barrier to success, i.e., the risk of not doing is that your people blockade the successful journey and stop you going on it. So we've got to labor that point. We've got to give HR leaders presence and teach them in some way or shape or form performance, being able to stand and articulate what it is that they need to articulate to get these things over the line. Representative, the word that we used earlier on that we were exploring, might not be the right word because it comes with the negative connotations, perhaps of, I suppose, collectives and all of that's maybe not the union view. Representative. We don't want representative feeling in the boardroom. We want peer feeling in the boardroom. And actually, business leaders, well, I was going to say it that way around. HR leaders are business leaders, right? Business leader is what you are, not a HR leader. HR just happens to be the discipline that you have and the context and the lens that you look through. So I do think there is a whole load that people can take away from that conversation and what they might choose to do next. I know that you've recorded some great content for us in terms of some of the structure of a good business case. There were 3 questions, weren't there, that sit within the structure of a great business case. Remind me what those 3 questions are.
So what the actual business risk is, what happens if you don't do anything with that, and what's the actual impact and the results that come out of that.
Yeah. So it's the problem that we're looking to solve here, the risk of doing nothing, and what's the outcome if we do it. This is what we'll get. And it's so beautifully simple when we say it like that. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and thank you again for bringing so much experience in business leadership, not people leadership, right? Not HR, business leadership. Thanks for bringing that into the mix today, because there'll be people on their HR journeys in their workplaces that may not have that level of experience. Equally, they may be so jaded by their own experience that they've might have been in the game for a while that they need to hear from a like-minded peer that there are ways in which we can drive the people initiatives across the line. Thank you for bringing your lens of being the employee in the mix, and also that performance energy that really I think everyone in business can learn from. Like, if we could just stick everyone on a holiday park for a
I know,
week,
it'd be great, wouldn't it?
It'd be great. It'd be a great piece of, great exercise. Thank you for bringing all your experience. Those that perhaps, anyone listening or watching would like to find out more about your work or what you do at Lanes HR, how can they find you?
Just www.laneshr.co.uk.
Nice
As
and
easy as
easy.
that,
There we
I
go.
know.
Well, thank you so much today. The show is all about rewarding relationships. This is rooted in that, in terms of how we engage employees that then engage our customers, and that service profit chain only exists when we do it well.
Mm.
Thank you for bringing your voices to that.
Thank
Thank
you.